Hi, I wanted to talk a little bit in this video about what's coming up in the near future for the PhatPhish product. Now, currently the version that's out there for you to download off the website is version 1.8. That's been out since March, and it's getting the time where I'm starting to think about what features we might want to put in the product, what people might want to see going forward. I've gathered a few ideas from feedback I've had off people, and I'm always open to suggestions from you guys. So I thought what I'd do is I'll talk about things that's kind of in the roadmap for the next version. Just grab a cheat sheet here. There's a couple of little cosmetic things. One, if you've noticed it already, it's probably bothering you, and that's that when you're looking at the neck view, the grain of the wood actually runs at about 90 degrees to what it should. It seems to run across the neck rather than up and down. So somebody pointed that out to me, and I was, oh yeah, that's a problem. So we'll get that fixed. Another little thing that I've just incorporated into the latest version I've got on my machine here is when you're playing scales back. Currently, you've got the option to play the scale ascending over 1 or 2 octaves or descending over 1 or 2 octaves. I've added the option now where you can actually play the scale or the pattern up and then down over 1 or 2 octaves. So it just gives you something extra to practice against. I've been thinking quite a bit recently about the riff builder functionality that's in there. I did a tutorial video a week or so ago where I was talking about building patterns off scales and using those for your as part of your daily practice routine. What I'm thinking about doing is revisiting the riff builder in there and focusing more on what you can do with it for building practice patterns. I think Riff Builder, it's quite a catchy name, but I'm thinking about renaming it as the Pattern Builder. And the main modification I'm thinking about making to it, an addition rather, is to allow you to import or export patterns that have been defined. So if you come up with a really nice practice pattern, that give you the ability to save that as a file, and then pass that to somebody else, and then they could import it into their copy of PhatPhish. I thought it might be quite good fun if I could find a way to make that sort of thing available through Facebook, and possibly have the patterns encoded in such a way that they're sort of readable as just straight text, and some way of being able to copy a pattern definition from the Facebook page and then paste it into your copy of PhatPhish, so to have a means of exchanging patterns that way. Still kind of working on that, but I think that should be quite a fun thing to do. I had 1 or 2 requests for alternative tunings and so on, so like quick ways of getting to those alternative tunings. As it stands, you can tune that virtual guitar pretty much any way you want, but thought it might be quite nice to have some extra preset buttons. So a while ago somebody was asking me about putting it into like Keith Richards mode, and getting that 5-string open G that Keith Richards uses. So I'm thinking about a way of having some preset buttons on there to go to some standard alternate tunings. Probably the biggest change I've got in mind for the next version is one that was suggested by good old Mr. Nick Nasty, who's given us quite a few good ideas for the product over the years. And what he's asked is, could add in something whereby when you're hearing a scale being played through, you can actually hear a background chord. And he's right, when you get into doing things like learning modes, just hearing the scale or the mode being played through isn't that educational. It makes a lot more sense to be able to hear that scale being played over an underlying chord, because that will really let you hear the modal tonality. So there's quite a bit of probably engineering around. There's like the playback engine and the MIDI engine in PhatPhish to do that, but it's something I think is quite an interesting idea, and I'd like to pursue that. So on top of those main features, I've got a few little under the skin, under the bonnet modifications, little cosmetic things that I might look at for the next version as well. And I also got 1 or 2 ideas much more significant. I think will probably be in sort of like a next +1 version. Some fairly significant changes potentially, opening up some new possibilities for what the product can do. But I think I'll hold off on those and possibly wait until another version after the next. And as always, I'm open to suggestions and comments and feedback from yourselves. A lot of what's in the product, it started off just my ideas as a guitarist, what I'd like to see, what would be useful for me, what I thought would be useful for other guitarists, and things that as a software developer I thought might be interesting ways or useful ways to exploit the technology. But I'm always open to suggestions from other people about what could go into the product. There's quite a few features that you see in the product now are as a direct or an indirect result of feedback that I've received from other PhatPhish users. Okay, so that's kind of where we're going with the main product. Now, one thing that I've been getting a lot of questions about, either the Facebook page or a lot of private messages, is about the availability of PhatPhish for platforms other than Windows. Just need to kind of give you a statement where I'm at with that. The product was developed originally for, I think, Windows Millennium Edition. I think was the version that was the mainstream version of Windows that was out when I started working on it. And it's always been a Windows product. I've never really had any major ambitions to get it ported to other platforms. Now, a lot of people have come along and said, can I have this to run on a Mac? Or increasingly people saying, I want to be able to take this with me, I want it running on an Android phone or an iPhone or whatever. Now, technologically, that represents kind of a challenge, because the code, the underlying program code, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands of lines of code to make up PhatPhish, and that represents hundreds, possibly thousands of hours of development effort over the years. To recreate that in a different programming language that works on a different platform is very, very significant, probably more work than I can really undertake at the moment. Probably more work than is practical to do, to be perfectly honest. So the short-term answer is there going to be a version that offers everything that PhatPhish gives you on Windows available for Mac or for handheld device like an Android phone or an iPhone? I'm afraid the answer to that's going to be no. What I have been doing though is thinking about, is there any way I can make something available for the Android community or for the Mac users amongst you, and without having to go down the track of completely re-engineering the product and having to maintain multiple versions of the code base, one for Windows, one for Mac, and so on. And I think I might have come up with a bit of a compromise. And what I'm thinking of doing is developing something basic that will just be accessible through a web browser. So a web service that will run on the PhatPhish website, whereby you can just browse to it using either Safari on your Mac, or the browser on your mobile phone, or Firefox off your Windows PC for that matter. And from there, just get the more basic functionality out of PhatPhish, being able to see the guitar neck, dial in a particular scale, and see how the fingerings are. Nothing as complex as what we have on the main version of PhatPhish, so there won't be things like the pattern, the riff builder, something like the playback functionality. I can't see being able to deliver that very easily, or in a timely sort of fashion from a web interface. But I'm thinking it might be practicable to do a simple website type of feature where you can get some of the basic functionality of PhatPhish. So really now I'd be interested in getting some feedback from you guys and gals as to what would you think about that. Until I started thinking about this, my main priority is to get the next version of PhatPhish ready to launch at the North East Guitar Show in Newcastle in October. That was just kind of an arbitrary deadline that I'd set myself. If I get a lot of feedback from you that say, actually, there's a lot of us out here using Macs, or a lot of people are out and about using Android phones or iPhones, and Blackberries, and we'll want to be able to do something over while we're out and about, then I could shift priority and do a bit more work on a web-based interface, park the Windows version of PhatPhish for a little while, and then come back to that once I've delivered something basic over the web. So really I'd be interested in getting some feedback from you, either private messages on the Facebook timeline for PhatPhish, in the comments section down there on YouTube, get your comments to me. Let me know what you think. Would you be interested in a web version? Would you be more interested in seeing more features on the Windows version of PhatPhish? So go to version 1.9 with some more features in, like I was talking about before. So that's kind of it. As an aside, somebody asked me a question about the idea of being able to come up with an Android version or a Blackberry version or a Mac version or whatever. And I said I didn't really have the time, or in case of some of the platforms, I don't immediately have the programming skills or familiarity with the programming languages that particular platforms use. And someone said, could I go open source? For those of you who aren't familiar with the concept, open source, basically the source code of an application is the instructions that are given to the computer to make it do what it does. Now in my case, PhatPhish is what we call closed source. All the source code sits on my computer. It's in my ownership. I do what I want with the product, based on feedback from you guys, but I have control over it. Another model is what's called open source, where the source code, those instructions, are actually placed somewhere publicly available for any developer in the world who's interested to come along and twiddle with it. And the open source movement's quite popular. Personally, and this might sound a bit selfish, but I spent the last 10 years of my life growing PhatPhish. I've got quite an emotional attachment to it, and I'd like to kind of keep it under my control. So I've got no plans to throw it into the open source community to let people start tinkering with it and doing their own ports of it. If you're an open source freak and you really think open source is the way to go, so you're entitled to your opinion, but I think I'm entitled to mine. I created the PhatPhish code from scratch, and I want to try and keep a bit of control over it. So anything that happens with it going forward will be again based on feedback, what I think people the users want, but it'll be stuff that's that's coming off out of my sphere of control. Okay, so that's a bit of a look for if you like the roadmap for PhatPhish for the near coming future. As I say, please give me your suggestions for what you'd like to see in the future version, and your thoughts on what your priorities would be if you'd like to see something that works over the web, or you'd like to see a richer version of what's already out there on the Windows platform. Okay, thanks for your time. I look forward to getting your emails, messages, comments and so on, and see you in another video sometime soon. Bye for now.